Lena had worked at the same office for nearly 5 years. Every day, she arrived on time, dressed neatly, and gave her best effort in her job. She had earned the respect of her colleagues and supervisors, and had even received a few promotions along the way. But there was one person who always made Lena feel uncomfortable, her boss, Mr. Thompson. At first, she didn't think much of it. He had always seemed distant, and sometimes his comments felt off. But over time, Lena began to realize that Mr. Thompson didn't like her. It wasn't just that he was a tough boss. There was something else. He would make snide remarks about her work, even when she did everything correctly. He would ignore her ideas in meetings, only to bring them up later as if they were his own. But worst of all, he would sometimes make comments about her race. They were subtle at first, little comments that seemed like jokes. But over time, they grew more frequent and more hurtful. Lena tried to ignore it. She focused on her work, telling herself that if she did her job well, Mr. Thompson's behavior wouldn't matter. She worked harder than anyone else, trying to prove herself. But no matter what she did, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One Wednesday morning, everything changed. Lena was called into Mr. Thompson's office. Her heart raced as she sat down, wondering what this meeting could be about. She had been working on an important project for the past few weeks, and everything was on track. There was no reason to think anything was wrong. But as soon as she sat down, Mr. Thompson's cold voice cut through the silence. "Lena," he began, his eyes avoiding hers, "I'm afraid I'm going to have to let you go." Lena blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "What?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You're fired," he repeated. "Your performance hasn't been up to the standard I expect." Lena felt the blood drain from her face. She had worked tirelessly on her projects. She had never received any formal warnings about her work. "But I don't understand. My work has been fine. You haven't said anything until now." Mr. Thompson shrugged, his face impassive. "It's just not working out. I don't have to explain myself." Lena sat there, stunned. She had been expecting a conversation about a project or some feedback on her performance, but this was something entirely different. She knew that there was more to this decision than what he was saying. She had worked with other managers before, and they had always communicated openly with her. This was different. This felt personal. As she sat there, a mix of confusion and anger began to grow inside her. She knew she had done nothing wrong. This wasn't about her work. It was about something else, something she couldn't yet put her finger on. Lena took a deep breath and stood up, trying to hold back her emotions. "I don't accept this," she said quietly, looking directly at Mr. Thompson for the first time. "I know I haven't done anything to deserve this." Mr. Thompson didn't respond. He simply waved his hand dismissively, as if he had already moved on from the conversation. "It's done, Lena. You can go now." Lena left his office with her head held high, but inside, she was boiling. How could he do this to her? What had she done to deserve such treatment? She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As she packed up her things, Lena made a promise to herself. She wasn't going to let this be the end. She didn't know how or when, but she was going to make sure Mr. Thompson knew exactly what kind of mistake he had just made. Lena walked out of the office, her mind racing with thoughts she could barely understand. Her body felt heavy, as though she were walking in a fog. The decision had come out of nowhere, and yet in some way, it felt all too familiar. She had faced discrimination before, subtle, but real. Every time she had to fight for recognition, every time she was passed over for a promotion, it was a reminder that she was different in her boss's eyes. But this time, it was different. This time, she wasn't going to just let it slide. She wasn't going to be silent anymore. As Lena made her way home, she replayed the conversation with Mr. Thompson over and over in her mind. He hadn't even given her a real reason for the firing. The words he used were cold, impersonal. His eyes avoided hers, and his tone was sharp. She couldn't help but wonder if it had all been building up, if his dismissive attitude and the little remarks had finally pushed him to make this move. It hurt, more than she had expected. She had always tried to rise above the small slights, to work harder than anyone else, to prove herself in a world where the odds weren't always in her favor. But now, it felt like all that hard work hadn't meant a thing. In a single moment, everything she had built felt like it had come crashing down. That evening, Lena sat in her apartment, staring at her phone. It was hard to focus, hard to think straight. She had no idea what to do next. For the first time in a long while, she felt uncertain about her future. But as she sat there, something started to change. Her frustration began to shift. It wasn't just anger at being fired that was bubbling up inside her. It was the realization that she had been dealing with this kind of treatment for far too long. And now this unfair firing was the last straw. She wasn't going to let it break her. No, she was going to turn this into something. She was going to show Mr. Thompson and everyone else that she wouldn't just accept the way she had been treated. She wasn't going to be a victim of anyone's bias or hate. Lena took a deep breath and pulled out her laptop. The first step was clear. She needed to understand the law. She needed to know what her rights were, what she could do to hold Mr. Thompson accountable. She wasn't just going to let him get away with this. But it wasn't just about fighting back legally. She knew there had to be a bigger plan. What if she could show him, and the world, what someone like her could achieve? What if she could build something bigger than the company that had let her go? Something that could not only help herself but others who had been in the same position. Lena spent the night researching. She read about discrimination cases, learned about legal steps, and even reached out to a few friends in her network who could help guide her through the process. The more she read, the clearer her path became. She was done being silent. She was done letting people like Mr. Thompson walk all over her. By the time the sun came up, Lena had a plan. She wasn't just going to fight back. She was going to rise higher than ever before. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Lena was stronger than she had ever been. No one was going to stop her, not Mr. Thompson, not anyone. She was about to turn her frustration into fuel for something much bigger than she could have imagined. The next few days were a blur for Lena. She was determined to turn her situation around, but she knew it wasn't going to happen overnight. She had to be careful, deliberate, and strategic. Lena had always been a hard worker, but this time, her efforts had to be focused on something bigger. She needed to be smart about this. As she sat in her small apartment, Lena started to plan. The first step was to gather information. She reached out to a few colleagues from her old job. Some of them had left the company months ago, while others were still there, quietly enduring the same uncomfortable environment. She wanted to know if anyone had seen or experienced what she had. She knew that if she could find evidence of a pattern, it could be her key to taking action. Lena spent hours drafting emails and making phone calls. She talked to a lawyer who specialized in workplace discrimination, learning about the legal steps she could take. She discovered that there were protections in place for employees like her, even if her boss had tried to intimidate her. It was a small relief, but it also made her more determined. She wasn't just going to take this lying down. By the end of the week, Lena had gathered a solid amount of information. She had spoken to a few other former employees, and one of them shared a story about Mr. Thompson's rude behavior. It wasn't enough to get him fired, but it was certainly enough to show that this wasn't an isolated incident. Lena knew she needed more, but she was starting to feel hopeful. She had options, but she wasn't only thinking about legal action. Lena knew that fighting back through the courts could take months, maybe even years. She wanted to act now. She started to consider what else she could do to prove her strength and value, both to herself and to others. One evening, while scrolling through her social media accounts, she had an idea. Lena had built a solid online presence over the years, posting about her career, personal growth, and the things she was passionate about. What if she used that platform to speak out? What if she shared her story and showed the world that someone like her wasn't going to be held down? Her heart raced as she typed the first few words of a post. It's time to take a stand. No one should ever feel less than because of who they are. It felt powerful, but also a little scary. She wasn't sure what kind of reaction she would get. Would people support her, or would they turn away? It was a risk, but she felt in her gut that it was the right thing to do. Lena hesitated for a moment before hitting the post button. The moment the words were out there, she felt a sense of relief. She had taken her first step towards something bigger than just getting even. She was going to use her voice, her platform, to make a difference. Within hours, the post was getting attention. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers were commenting in support. Messages poured in, encouraging her to keep going, to keep fighting for what was right. Lena felt a new sense of strength, and for the first time since the firing, she felt like she wasn't alone. This wasn't just about getting back at her boss anymore. It was about showing the world her true power and resilience. She wasn't just going to recover from this, she was going to rise from it. And in doing so, help others who had been in her position. Lena woke up the next morning feeling more determined than ever. The support she had received from her post the night before had been overwhelming. It was like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she was no longer powerless. She had taken control of her own story, and now it was time to move forward. As she sat at her desk, Lena reflected on the past few days. She had spent so much time focusing on what had gone wrong, on the unfair firing, the way Mr. Thompson had treated her, and the anger that had consumed her. But now, she was shifting her focus to what she could do next. She knew that her journey was far from over. The first thing Lena decided to do was work on herself. She had always been a professional, a driven individual who wanted to be the best at what she did. But somewhere along the way, she had forgotten to focus on her own personal growth. In the rush to prove herself to others, she had neglected her own needs. Now she was going to change that. Lena started by enrolling in a few online courses related to her field. She wasn't sure where these new skills would take her, but she was eager to learn. She read books, attended webinars, and even started a journal where she wrote down her thoughts and ideas. Every day, she spent time improving herself, whether it was learning something new or just taking time to reflect on her goals. While Lena worked on her personal development, she also began to build her professional network. She reached out to former colleagues, mentors, and even some of the people who had supported her on social media. She wanted to surround herself with positive influences, people who understood her value and could help her grow in her career. The more Lena connected with others, the more she realized how many people had been through similar situations. She wasn't alone in her struggle. There were so many others who had faced workplace discrimination, unfair treatment, or toxic environments. Lena knew that she had the chance to make a real difference, not just for herself, but for others too. One afternoon, while attending an online networking event, Lena met someone who would change the course of her journey. Her name was Rachel, and she was a career coach who had worked with dozens of women in Lena's position. Rachel's advice was straightforward but powerful. Take what you've been through and turn it into something bigger. Your story has the power to inspire others, but it also has the power to open doors for you. Don't just wait for opportunities. Create them. Those words stuck with Lena. She had been waiting for someone to give her permission to move forward, to take control of her destiny. But now she understood that the only permission she needed was her own. She didn't have to wait for the perfect job or the perfect moment. She could create the opportunity she wanted. With this new mindset, Lena began making plans for the future. She started working on a blog where she could share her story, her lessons learned, and her journey toward healing and success. She also began exploring freelance work, using her new skills, and building a portfolio that would showcase her talent. As the weeks went by, Lena's confidence grew. She wasn't just recovering from being fired. She was building a new path for herself. She was becoming the person she had always wanted to be, strong, independent, and ready to face whatever challenges came her way. For the first time since the firing, Lena felt excited about her future. She knew that whatever happened next, she was going to be just fine. She had learned that her worth wasn't defined by a job or a boss. Her worth came from who she was, and she was more than ready to show the world. While Lena was focused on building her new life, her former boss, Mr. Thompson, was facing some troubles of his own. Things weren't going well for him. Lena had heard rumors about the company he worked for, and she couldn't help but smile to herself. It seemed that Mr. Thompson wasn't as untouchable as he thought. The company was going through a rough patch. A few key leaders had left, and some of the employees were starting to speak out about the unfair treatment they had experienced. Lena wasn't surprised. She had seen it all firsthand, the way Mr. Thompson treated people, especially those he didn't like. But she hadn't expected things to turn so quickly against him. One morning, while browsing through her newsfeed, Lena saw a story about the company. The headline caught her attention. Company faces backlash over unfair practices. The article detailed how some former employees had started speaking publicly about the toxic work environment and unethical decisions made by the leadership team. Lena's heart raced as she read through it. She couldn't help but think that some of the things being shared sounded familiar. She quickly reached out to a former colleague, Jamie, who still worked at the company. Jamie confirmed Lena's suspicions. It seemed that Mr. Thompson had become more careless in his management style, making decisions that were damaging to both the company and its employees. Some of the other workers had already started organizing and pushing for change. Lena couldn't believe it. She knew that Mr. Thompson had always been difficult, but this was something else entirely. He had alienated so many people, and now it was all catching up to him. The company's reputation was starting to crumble, and Lena could see how his arrogance had played a big role in it. As she sat back and processed the information, Lena felt a small sense of satisfaction. She hadn't needed to do anything. Mr. Thompson's own actions had led him down this path. But even more than that, she felt a renewed sense of confidence. Everything she had been through, all the challenges she had faced, had only made her stronger. She was no longer focused on getting back at him. She was focused on her own success. But Lena didn't stop there. She had learned so much from her experience, and now she wanted to help others who had been mistreated. She knew that there were countless people like her, stuck in toxic work environments, struggling to stand up for themselves. She began to think about how she could turn her experiences into something that could benefit others. Lena started writing a series of blog posts. In these posts, she shared her story and the lessons she had learned about dealing with workplace discrimination, standing up for yourself, and finding strength in difficult situations. She didn't just want to share her own journey. She wanted to inspire others to take action, to stop letting unfair treatment define their lives. The response was overwhelming. People from all over began commenting on her posts, sharing their own stories, and offering support. It felt like a community was forming around her, a group of people who were ready to make a change. It was clear that Lena wasn't just helping herself. She was helping others find their voice. Back at the company, Mr. Thompson's situation continued to worsen. His once unquestioned authority was being challenged by employees, and the pressure on him began to mount. Lena didn't need to do anything to him. His own actions were bringing him down. But as he struggled, Lena flourished. She had taken control of her own destiny, and nothing, not even her past experiences, could hold her back now. Lena's success with her blog was just the beginning. The messages of support, the stories shared by others, it was clear that she was making an impact. But now, Lena knew it was time to take things to the next level. She wasn't just going to sit back and watch things unfold. She had learned from her experiences, and she was ready to act. One afternoon, after a particularly inspiring conversation with Rachel, her career coach, Lena decided to contact the media. She had built a strong online presence, and now she wanted to use it to spread her message even further. Lena knew that her story could help change the way people thought about workplace injustice. It wasn't just about her experience. It was about the countless others who were too afraid to speak up. Lena crafted a powerful email to a local news station. She shared her story briefly, explaining how she had been treated unfairly by her former boss and how she had turned her experience into a platform to help others. She wrote about the importance of standing up for oneself and how too many people were suffering in silence, unable to break free from toxic work environments. After sending the email, Lena sat nervously by her phone. She had no idea what kind of response she would get. Would the news station even take her seriously? Would they care about her story? To her surprise, just a few hours later, she received a response. The news team was interested in hearing more. They wanted to do a segment about workplace discrimination and how people like Lena were fighting back. They asked if she would be willing to do an interview. Lena couldn't believe it. This was a huge opportunity, one that she had never expected. She agreed to the interview without hesitation, knowing that this could be her chance to reach even more people with her message. The next week, Lena found herself sitting in front of a camera, speaking to a reporter about her journey. As she spoke, she felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. This was real now. Her story was no longer just something she had shared with her friends and family. It was going out into the world. She knew that by sharing her experiences, she was giving a voice to others who had felt silence for too long. During the interview, Lena spoke about her time working for Mr. Thompson, the unfair treatment she had endured, and how she had found the strength to move forward. She talked about the power of speaking up and taking control of one's own story. She wanted people to understand that they didn't have to accept mistreatment. They could rise above it, just like she had. The interview aired a few days later, and the response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life reached out to Lena, sharing their own stories of workplace struggles and expressing their gratitude for her bravery. She had done something she had never imagined possible. She had become a voice for the voiceless, showing people that it was possible to fight back and win. At the same time, Lena's blog continued to grow, and so did her professional opportunities. She was approached by companies who admired her story and wanted to offer her consulting work. People in her industry began recognizing her as an expert, not just because of her talent, but because of her courage to stand up and speak out. Mr. Thompson, on the other hand, was becoming more and more isolated. The company's reputation had been damaged by the stories of its toxic environment, and many employees had started to leave. His arrogance and poor decisions were starting to catch up with him, and Lena could see that the consequences were inevitable. Lena had no desire to see him suffer, but it was clear that his actions were leading him down a path of self-destruction. She had moved on. She had found a new purpose, a new direction in life, and nothing could stop her now. Lena had spent the last few weeks building a new life for herself. She had worked tirelessly to transform her painful experience into something positive, not just for herself, but for others as well. Her blog was gaining traction, and her recent media appearance had given her the platform she needed to reach even more people. Things were finally moving in the right direction. But as she was focused on her new path, something unexpected happened. She received an email from an unknown address. The subject line read, "I need to speak with you. It's about Mr. Thompson." Lena hesitated. She hadn't thought about her former boss in a while. She had moved on, focusing on her future, but she couldn't ignore the email. Curiosity got the better of her, and she opened it. The email was from a former colleague who still worked at the company. The message explained that Mr. Thompson was getting desperate. His reputation was crumbling, and the pressure from employees and the media had become too much for him to handle. But what really caught Lena's attention was the last line of the email. "He wants to apologize to you. He's asking for a meeting." Lena stared at the screen, unsure of how to feel. A part of her wanted to laugh. After everything that had happened, after the way he had treated her, now he wanted to apologize. She could hardly believe it. But another part of her felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Mr. Thompson had never once taken responsibility for his actions, and now he was asking for her forgiveness. It was almost too surreal to believe. Lena took a deep breath. She didn't need his apology, but she knew this moment could serve a purpose. It could be an opportunity to show him that she had moved on, and that his attempts to undermine her had failed. She wasn't sure what to expect from the meeting, but she agreed to meet him. The next day, Lena walked into the small, quiet cafe where they had agreed to meet. Her mind was calm, but her heart was racing. She wasn't nervous, she was confident. This wasn't about her trying to get back at him. It was about showing him, and herself, how far she had come. Mr. Thompson was already there, sitting at a table in the corner. His face was tired, and he looked different, smaller somehow. He stood up when Lena approached, but his eyes didn't meet hers right away. He looked uncomfortable, unsure of what to say. "Lena," he said, his voice softer than she remembered. "I owe you an apology." Lena sat down across from him, her expression neutral. She didn't interrupt. She wanted to hear what he had to say. "I was wrong," he continued. "I treated you unfairly. I let my own issues get in the way of your career. I made mistakes, and I see that now. I'm sorry." Lena listened carefully. This wasn't the apology she had expected, and it wasn't the kind of apology she needed. But it was something. It was the first time Mr. Thompson had taken responsibility for his actions. For a moment, Lena sat in silence. She thought about the pain she had gone through, the way he had treated her, and how much stronger she had become because of it. She wasn't angry anymore. She had moved past the hurt. "I appreciate your apology," Lena finally said, looking him directly in the eyes. "But I don't need it. I've learned to stand up for myself. I've built something for myself, and I'm not the same person I was when you fired me." Mr. Thompson nodded slowly. He didn't argue. Instead, he seemed to accept what she was saying. He looked like he had finally realized the weight of his actions, even if it was too late to undo the damage. Lena stood up, ready to leave. "I hope you take this opportunity to learn from your mistakes," she said, "and treat others better in the future." As she walked away from the cafe, Lena felt a sense of closure. She had faced her past head-on, and now she could move forward, unburdened by the past. She had taken control of her life, and no one, not even Mr. Thompson, could take that away from her. Lena walked out of the cafe, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. The meeting with Mr. Thompson, though brief and unexpected, had given her the final piece she needed. His apology, though late, had offered her the closure she had never asked for. But more importantly, it had shown her how far she had come. She had risen above the situation, stronger and more confident than ever before. In the weeks that followed, Lena's life continued to change in ways she had never imagined. Her blog gained even more attention, and she was invited to speak at conferences and workshops about workplace equality, standing up for yourself, and overcoming adversity. People admired her courage, and many shared their own stories with her, telling her how she had inspired them to take action in their own lives. Lena's reputation as a voice for those who had been mistreated continued to grow. She began consulting for companies, helping them create better work environments, and offering advice to people who were in situations like the one she had once been in. She had become a symbol of hope for so many, and she was determined to keep pushing forward. But it wasn't just her career that was thriving. Lena had begun to surround herself with a network of supportive friends and mentors. She had learned that true success wasn't just about career achievements or recognition. It was about building meaningful relationships, staying true to yourself, and helping others along the way. As Lena sat in her apartment one evening, reflecting on how much had changed, she couldn't help but smile. She had spent so much time in the past feeling like a victim, like she had no control over what happened to her. But now she understood that she had always held the power. It wasn't the events that defined her. It was how she chose to react to them. And she had chosen to rise. Then, one day, she received an unexpected email. It was from a company that had seen her work and wanted to offer her a position. It was everything she had ever wanted. A job that valued her skills, her ideas, and her unique perspective. It felt like a dream come true, but Lena knew she had earned it. She had worked hard for every opportunity that came her way. As she sat at her desk, preparing for her first day at the new job, Lena took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the day she had been fired, the confusion and anger she had felt. She thought about the sleepless nights spent researching, planning, and learning. And she thought about all the people who had supported her along the way, those who believed in her when she doubted herself. Lena had made it. She had turned her darkest moments into the fuel that powered her success. She had gone from being a woman who was fired without reason to someone who had found her voice and her strength. She had created her own path, and she was walking it with confidence and purpose. In the end, Lena knew that her journey wasn't about getting revenge or seeking validation. It was about proving to herself that she was capable of achieving anything, no matter what obstacles came her way. She had faced hardship, but she had never let it define her. Instead, she had used it to build something better. And now, with a new job, a supportive community, and a future full of possibilities, Lena couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of something even greater. Lena woke up early that morning, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She was excited for her first day at the new job, but more than that, she was eager to continue the journey she had started. The road ahead was filled with opportunities, and she was ready to embrace them all. Over the past few months, Lena had come a long way. She had learned to turn adversity into strength, and she had built something meaningful from the pain and frustration of her past. Her story had inspired so many others, and now she was in a position to help even more people. She felt proud of what she had accomplished, but she also knew that this was just the beginning. As she arrived at her new office, Lena couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. The building was modern and bright, filled with people who seemed friendly and eager to work. She could already tell that this was a place where her ideas would be valued, where she would have the opportunity to grow and thrive. Her first day was filled with introductions, meetings, and learning the ropes of her new role. It was a lot to take in, but Lena loved every minute of it. She felt a sense of belonging that she hadn't experienced before. The people she met were kind, supportive, and open to new ideas, and it was clear that the company valued diversity and inclusion. As Lena settled into her new job, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. She thought back to the days when she had felt powerless, when she had struggled to believe in herself. Now she was in a place where she could make a real difference, not just for herself, but for others too. One afternoon during a lunch break, Lena sat with a few of her new colleagues. They asked her about her journey, and Lena shared her story. She spoke about the difficult times she had faced at her previous job, and how she had used that experience to grow stronger. She talked about the importance of speaking up, of standing up for yourself, and of helping others who were struggling with the same issues. Her colleagues listened attentively, and some of them shared their own experiences of workplace challenges. Lena realized that her story wasn't unique. It was shared by so many people who had faced discrimination, unfair treatment, or simply been overlooked. But by sharing her journey, she had started a conversation, one that could lead to change. In the months that followed, Lena continued to excel in her new role. She worked hard, but she also made time to mentor others who were facing challenges in their careers. She became a trusted voice for those who needed support, and she used her platform to continue advocating for workplace equality and fairness. Lena knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt, but she also knew that she was stronger than ever. She had faced the worst and come out on top. She had learned that success wasn't just about achieving your goals. It was about staying true to who you are and helping others along the way. Looking ahead, Lena felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had turned her pain into power, her struggles into strength, and now, as she looked toward the future, she knew that no matter what came her way, she would always rise above it. Lena had come full circle. She had gone from being fired unjustly to becoming an advocate for change, and nothing could stop her now. The road ahead was bright, and she was ready to walk it with confidence and determination.